The next one is the facilities rebuild. Hey?
We have an original motion, does that now become an amendment?
No, that was a replacement, wasn't it?
That was the only motion that was put.
It was the only motion that was put. So the next one is the facilities rebuild plan proposed demolition of Linwood Library. And we have the same team at the end of the table. Does someone want to move this recommendation? Yanni, are you?
An amendment that that basically delegates the decisions around leasing to the community board and also establishes a working party to look at future use and plans of the Linwood Library site and the provision of library services.
So you want to move all of the recommendations that are there?
6.1's okay. I think actually we should set up a working party to look at future use with the community board, and so delegating the corporate support manager to initiate, manage and finalise public tendering process. That's fine. I think the lease should come back to the community board. That's pretty much normal. I don't think it needs to be delegated away, and I think 6.5 is fine. And then I just think there's a 6.6, which is around establishing a working party to look at future options for the Linwood Library site and the Linwood Library service provision.
So we're not resolving to make the land available for lease after completion of the demolition by way of public tender?
Until you have a working party that can look at what the options are, it seems pretty silly to go out and come up with a solution.
Except that how do we find out what the options are?
Well, obviously that's what the working party could work through with other stakeholders.
Would you not call for an expression of interest in the land or something? I can see resolving to make the land available for lease and then just delegating all authority on that takes it out of the community board's hands. But I just wonder whether resolving to set up this we'll just, do you need a working party or do you just refer it to the community board?
Well, you can refer it to the community board, but what we want is actually action happening. So we want people being proactive, working around. I also think we need the organisation as a council needs to provide some support around future thinking for Linwood, because there's issues around what do we do. We've got an existing library in the mall and that's got a finite period of time. So there needs to be a process, and I think a working party is a better way forward than just going to the community board.
But if you don't call for an expression of interest, how do you know what the options are? I'm sorry, I just don't understand. Ali?
My comments around that would be the fact that there is an immediate use for this land that's been identified that's going to be revenue creating, which is the lease of the land to the mall. Now, surely we can do what Yanni's suggesting, but at the same time create a revenue stream and use the land in the short term. I don't see why one would rule out the other.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, I overlooked that.
So that's what the working party would look at and go, based on talking to the mall, talking on to other stakeholders, maybe we could call for expressions of interest, but it seems like we do have to be open and transparent around our process. But given the relationship with the mall and the existing library, I think just to look at 4.5 doesn't really do it. We haven't received a proposal from the mall. No one's at a governance level is working through these options, and that's why I think it's better to have a governance level process working through what is actually the options. I think it makes a lot of sense leasing out the land to raise revenue, but you also need to think about who's actually going to lease it. Going up for a public tender might not be the best thing.
6.2. So the public tender process would address your concerns.
But why would you go up for a public tender if you've got a relationship with the mall that we're paying the mall rent for the library, and and you might want to do a deal around that, around the existing library site.
Wouldn't that be part of the public tender process?
Oh, okay.
I don't understand what the problem is.
Well, I do get what Yanni's saying, is that it might be a good idea for a smaller group involving the councillors and staff to actually work through what the future use is going to be. I mean, it looks like there's a really exciting opportunity there. Darren.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I guess the intention is demolish the building. Land becomes available rapidly thereafter, i.e. prior to this Christmas. We go through a public process which would flush out all and any interested parties on that small piece of land for a short-term lease whilst we get together via some other working group to look at what are the long-term options. So it's essentially bookmarking the land on a short-term opportunity with a potential source of revenue, or some other public group may want to come and express through the tender use of that site. Some evaluation that gets in place a short-term lease on the site while we work on what is the long-term option in Linwood, incorporating any and all activity with or without the mall.
But wouldn't it be better to do an expression of interest rather than a public tender? I mean, public tender might be 150 pages.
I guess maybe there's a little bit of semantics in that. Perhaps a public tendering process may just be an EOI that ends up becoming a lease or something. But an EOI shortlisted into perhaps an RFT or a tender process. It's really just stating that that's what we want to.
Yeah. Yeah, it shouldn't be delegated to staff to make all of those decisions. Yeah.
All we're saying, it's a short-term lease to give us some income. The way we actually decide what we're going to do.
It doesn't actually say that. It says resolve to make the land available for lease after the completion of the demolition by way of public tender. It doesn't say a short term. Yeah, Tim?
Just following on from what Yanni's saying, if it's a short-term lease, why don't we demolish the building, get it up to a car park or whatever, and then do a deal in a short term with the mall to offset the cost of the lease agreement with regards to the library while we look at moving forward. That way it's a win-win situation, and whatever happens for the long-term process. But I mean, it's going to save us money and build a relationship.
One of the things we could do, Your Worship, is go through, if we agree to demolish it, we can actually come back to you with a proposal. We will have a proposal from the mall. We could actually see what other interests are out there, and we'll bring it back to you at the next round, if you like. It won't be knocked over in a month's time by the time we put that out to tender. So maybe we proceed with the knockdown. Until we knock it down, we've got nothing to lease anyway, so then we can bring it back to you. We are just trying to maximise whatever revenue we can get in the short term, but basically it's not going to delay us if we actually remove that resolving that 60. Well, those let me think. Yeah, 6.2 to 6.5. You could take those out.
Okay. Well, but part of it is addressing 6.2. So resolve to make the land available on a short to medium term basis after the completion of the demolition by way of expression of interest, followed by public tender if necessary. You know, because I mean it may well be that the only expression of interest is the mall, but there might be something that we've got no handle on at the moment. And then and then but we need to I mean the big issue is the long-term use, you know, and we don't want what's happening in the short to medium term to impact negatively on the opportunity that the long-term position presents. But that's where we need to get the community board involved. So they've got to be involved in that long-term vision thing, and also making sure that the short to medium-term use is not in conflict with that. So, so rather than, I mean, do we want to delegate authority to the corporate support manager to manage? To initiate this process subject to the sign-off of the community board, or does that work?
Leanne, if I can just, I actually don't see any problem with what is up there at the moment with regards to the short to medium term use for the land. As you've identified, the issue is the long-term use for the land. So, as I said, I don't have any problem with what is up there at the moment, but maybe you want to add a 6.6 along the lines of that following the demolition of the building, discussions and a conversation with the community board and community commences with a view to identifying long-term use for the land. I think it's the next step following what is up there at the moment. This only relates to the short-term use of the land after the building is demolished.
Except that, I really like the idea of engaging the community board in this process really early. That's my view.
What, in the short-term use of the land process?
They're connected. You can't sort of see them as separate. If it involves them all, they're connected.
Right.
Yeah, the thing is, it's quite right. I mean, if we're involved in that process, we establish a better relationship with them all, or whoever, and that may, as we pointed out, may affect the long term or may assist the long term, but we need to be engaged in that process.
So subject to sign off by the Hagley Ferrymead Community Board.
The other thing is that community boards generally do local leases, so this is a local lease. So we're actually, if we agree to this, we're actually taking away a delegation from local community board and giving it to staff, which is not something I'm really happy with.
Yeah.
And there are, depending on what use goes there, like, you know, if you think about things on parks, for example, there could be activities that the community board really don't think in the best interest of the community to have there that staff think can raise revenue. So you might get that tension. So that's why I think it's important that it does go, to the community board for final, sign off, and probably actually for consideration in the short to medium term. But
So that requires a change to 6.4, does it? So delegate its authority to the corporate support manager to negotiate and conclude a lease. Yeah. Or do you say that there is currently authority in the community board to do that?
Well, that's my understanding. Peter Mitchell might be able to confirm.
I would recommend you put it in the resolution here so there's no misunderstanding about it.
Okay.
And I think you made the comment before, 6.4, the manager negotiates and recommends to the community board for decision a lease agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So the corporate service. So take out delegate its authority to. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah. And then, so you can take out 6.4 and 6 point, So, and do we need another one?
I think so. I think we should establish a working party with the local community board to look at the future of the site.
So who goes on the?
Well, probably a combination of staff, councillors, and
establish a working party of elected members and staff. Yeah, to consider the long-term opportunities that this land provides.
Long-term options around future use of the land.
Yeah,
and of library service provision in the
future
area.
Use for this land and library service and council services.
Yeah, council services.
And council services.
Right.
In the Linwood area, should we put?
Yeah.
Do you want to be specific about
Yep.
who's on the board or who's on the working party?
It's elected members and staff, so I don't know. Do we need to be more?
The mayor can sign off on the membership, or with the Chief Executive.
Mayor and Chief Executive to sign off. Thank you. I think that's a good result. So is there any discussion on that? Yeah, Jimmy?
I just want to ask the staff one question. Because I'm concerned a moment the council, due to the budget constraint, and also consider cost saving. If we review the 5.4 and the 5.5, because this the building actually is repairable, and also you estimate if we repair as the new and also including the fire damage, it's only $2 million. However, if you demolish and rebuild the new one, at least $3.1 million. Also, $45,000 to $55,000 we have to borrow from the infrastructure, the fund, etc. What is the rationale?
Just to be clear, the cost of demolishing the building won't be a drawdown from the betterment and infrastructure allowance. It's going to be paid for by the libraries unit out of their operating budget.
But that's only 45K.
That's the cost to demolish the building and make good. We estimate.
But repair, 2 million. Demolish.
We're not
rebuild.
voting on that though.
But we have a working party would like to consider overall property still.
We're going to establish a working party to look at the long-term options around future use of the land and council services in the Linwood area. So it's not, we're not making a decision about replacing the building to the same gross floor level, which is what that paragraph suggests. That's the financial implications that would be indicated by rebuilding to that size. But we've got a working party to look at what the options are. We're not making a decision on replacing the building. Okay.
Jimmy saying it says it's 2 million to repair and 3.1 to rebuild.
It's often the case.
Is that what why not repair? Why not?
But it's not. So what you're saying is that why would you?
My question is before we make decision to demolish this facility, what's the rationale compared to repair and rebuild? Because eventually, if we demolish this facility, eventually, working party, I assume, probably need to rebuild either the centralized or decentralized facility to meet the people's need in surrounding Linwood area. This is my concern.
The trouble is that for the insurance, the loss adjusters have issued a statement of position around earthquake repairs, 146,111. So that's all that, we're not accepting the insurance position, but as I understand it, the fire damage wasn't covered by insurance. Is that right?
The fire was at something like 3:50 in the afternoon, and the insurance kicked in at 4 o'clock. So we missed out by a few minutes. And so the fire did do a lot of damage, but obviously the earthquake also did damage. But I think Jimmy raises a valid point, which is if you agree to demolish it, you basically are, there's 1.1 million that you're probably having to spend more to build a new facility. I guess all I can say is that, and I wasn't on the council when they agreed to put the library here, but it isn't a location that hasn't worked. If you think of Eastgate and the mall and the way in which we're looking at things like public passenger transport, combined services around service centres, libraries, etc., it seems to me there's a real opportunity to look at doing something that's got a lot better outcome for the community, not dissimilar to Bishopdale. And so I think, that is a call that we make, but I personally do think it's the right thing to do, is to look at how we can get some greater synergy with the existing development in that area. Linwood has actually suffered from really poor strategic thinking, where you've got government departments on one corner, private development on another corner, the library on another site, and our service centre on a different site. So we need to get a holistic approach to it, and I think, we need to look at all those facilities and look at how we get some synergy.
So can we first get a response from staff from that question? Thanks. What's the question that Jimmy raised around the cost of the repair being cheaper than a rebuild?
My understanding is if you repaired it at $2 million, you would have a building, an older building that is repaired that may not meet all the needs. And would you invest that?
Yep.
And my decision is you've got $2 million. If you had $2 million, you could invest that in another building that would actually meet the community needs better. And so basically at the end of the day, we wouldn't come back to you with a $2 million recommendation to do up that building. And that's my understanding, that there are other opportunities to do that. You're not going to replace like with like, but you are maybe going to get a better facility if you were going to invest your $2 million. And that decision, my understanding, had already been made. Because basically by repairing an old building, you've still got an old building repaired and it doesn't actually meet. So you've got an opportunity to have, if you were going to replace something with exactly the same size, there's $1 million extra that you would need, but in actual fact you would actually design something totally different, potentially. So you wouldn't invest that $3 million.
I mean, it is an extra 1.1 million.
If you were going to replace like with like, but basically as Councillor Johansson said, basically like with like's not going to be the replacement. There's going to be a number of options out there. To get like for like, to just replace where you were standing still would cost you $2 million. And so the recommendation is to demolish, and we could build for $2 million a facility that would better meet the needs of that community on that site, if that's what was decided to do. Or you invest that $2 million into another site somewhere, you sell this block of land and you use some of the proceeds for that, and you get a better community outcome from the whole process.
All right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Oh, did we have a mover and a seconder? I thought we did. Yeah, we had Yanni and Paul Lonsdale. Sorry. My apologies. I'll put the motion again now that we properly are moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. Carried. Thank you. So I propose that we adjourn now for our meeting with because our guest has arrived. So if people could be up in the lounge by 12:30, and that gives 5 minutes to get up there, and we'll recommence the meeting at 2:30 this afternoon. So thank you very much.